Hello and good morning, my awakening souls and lights that have been cast into darkness. Or should I just say, human beings that have been born into this world. Today we want to talk about perception and consciousness. I always found it very fascinating and intriguing and puzzling how perception is part of our own inner world, but also influenced by the external world. We share the world with equal human beings, but it seems to be that we create our reality at the same time. So there's always this question, what part do we create and what part is given, and why does everybody have a different reality even though we live in the same situation and time? And all these questions are very interesting and existential. All right, so also a lot of famous people and geniuses also had a very kind of spiritual, almost spiritual, religious tendency, especially Nikola Tesla. But there are more, like, you know, I made a, I made a post in my community about this, and it doesn't matter, no, like Albert Einstein. So there are also physicists who are atheists, and then they start to um, research and find out things that then lead them to believe into some higher powers or something like that. Um, yeah. Um, so I want to explore with you the world of perception. Also, the manifestation, the spiritual manifestation, um, let's call it a business, it's a multi-million dollar business. So there is a lot of people who going to coaches and are working on their inner world in order to change something in the outside world. And the underlying idea, of course, is the law of gravity or frequency, or as within, so without. So people believe that they can influence their reality by influencing themselves or changing something in themselves. Yeah, and this is basically um, this miracle about perception, basically, I believe, or isn't it? Let's find out in today's episode. So, the question is, what are the ingredients of the information conscious perception consists of? How much of it is selective and defiant, as well as projected? And what is the origin of the part that is none of that and not influenced by us, if any at all? The nature of conscious perception is a profound philosophical and scientific question. To address it, we can analyze the ingredients of perception and the role of selectivity, defiance, and projection, as well as a potential origin of any aspect of perception that is independent of human influence. So, the ingredients of conscious perception. It arises from the interaction of several components, which can be grouped as follows: sensory inputs, external stimuli, raw data, light, sound waves, chemical molecules, smell, taste, mechanical pressure, touch, and bodily signals, interoception, are transduced by sensory organs into neural signals. So We have a kind of external sensory perception, which means any, molecules entering our nose and then we smell something or taste something, sound waves, light waves, energy basically, that enters our sensory organs. And we also have things happening within us that are perceived by sensory organs within us. So we have two kinds of sensory input, one within the body and some from the external world arriving at our body, or being measured by our body. Yeah, so bottom-up processing, this refers to the way raw sensory input is processed from the periphery to the brain where it is interpreted. Neural processing, this is number 2, neural processing. Sensory pathways. Information travels through nerves to the brain, often being filtered by structures like the thalamus, the relay center of the brain, before reaching the cortex. Neural representations. Perception is not a direct imprint of reality. Instead, sensory information is reconstructed into neural patterns, often enhanced, suppressed, or modified. So yeah, you see there is a signal coming in that is already reduced, which is already just a small fracture of all signals that are outside happening. And then it's already, before we even get a picture in the brain, it's already modified by this. Okay, it's reconstructed, enhanced, suppressed, and modified. Cognitive contributions. This means interpretation and meaning. Top-down processing. Our expectations, prior knowledge, beliefs, and attention shape how we interpret sensory information. This is what a lot of mindfulness coaches work on. This is what we can work on to change our individual reality. Top-down processing. Expectations, prior knowledge, beliefs, and attention shape how we interpret sensory information. So probably it's safe to say we cannot change the sensory information, but we can change our expectations, prior knowledge, beliefs, and attention shape. Okay, memory and learning. Past experiences influence present perception. For instance, once you learn to recognize a language, you hear words, not just sounds. Yes, memory and learning. Also, when you get alphabets, when you learn how to write and read and you know the rules of it, you hear words differently. Before, you simply rely on how you hear them, and you might get your own idea of how the word should sound, and you will speak it a little bit different. But once you learn how to write it, you will tend to come to a unified way to pronounce the word. So this change is extreme. So just that everybody is educated today and can read and write already has, you can't imagine how people in the Middle Ages who could not read and write, and and they did not have the same education that we have today, education, they lived in a different world. They saw everything different. Really, literally, they saw the world different. Okay. So attention modulation, what we focus on. Perception is selective. The brain cannot process all incoming sensory data at once, so attention acts as a spotlight that focuses on specific elements. No more explanation needed. Number 5, emotional and motivational states. Mood, emotions, and desires influence what we notice, how we interpret it, and how vivid the experience feels. Yeah, this refers to body chemistry for me, so or to overall health. Conscious awareness, the what it's like of experience. This is the subjective qualitative aspect of perception. sometimes referred to as qualia. This is the most mysterious and debated ingredient. We will come on to this later. How much of perception is selective, defiant, and projected? Conscious perception is not a passive reflection of reality. It is highly selective, often defiant, and heavily projected. Selective. Attention. We only perceive what we attend to. Inattentional blindness, failing to notice something in plain sight, is a clear example. Filtering of information. The brain actively filters out 99% of sensory information at any given moment. Let that sink in. Prioritizing survival relevant or goal relevant data. So we get a small percentage of what is happening outside in the sensory input signal. So I don't know how much percentage comes to us, maybe 1%, and this is the new 100% that is there. And then from this 1%, we again filter out 99%. So basically, what we think is reality is basically probably 0.01% of what's really happening. Okay. Yes, so biological constraints. We only perceive stimuli within certain ranges. Yeah, that's what I said, visible light or audible frequencies, meaning most of reality is already inaccessible to our senses. Second, defiant, resistance to change. Cognitive biases, such as confirmation bias, can make perception defiant against contradictory information. Illusions and hallucinations. The brain can maintain false perceptions even when confronted with contradictory evidence, e.g., optical illusions. Preconscious influence. Subliminal priming studies show that unconscious stimuli can influence conscious perception, often in ways that defy rational introspection. Sounds manipulative. 3. Projected. Top-down processing, expectations, and prior knowledge project meaning onto raw sensory data. For instance, when looking at ambiguous images, people often see what they expect to see. Predictive coding. This is important, predictive coding. The brain is a prediction machine, okay? We are an algorithm that predicts. It doesn't wait for sensory input to arrive. And it projects a model of the world and updates it when sensory input contradicts it. And I believe this is what special agents and some few people can do, is to not let the brain predict what they see, but to really see what they see a little bit more than others, okay? Then cultural and conceptual influence. Language, culture, and concepts shape perception. Imagine you come from Finland or somewhere where snow has 11 different names for each kind of snow. You will perceive snow completely different because you have another idea of that snow that you see. And when that only knows snow, when I see snow, it's always snow. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? So if I have 11 names for snow and each snow describes a different nuance of snow, my perceptual range is much larger to perceive snow. Okay, I give it more space, right? This is why I say words and knowledge is so important, but coffee is too. All right. What part of perception, if any, is independent of us? If any aspect of perception is not selective, defined, or projected, it would be the objective reality or raw data. However, this part is tricky to isolate because of how perception works. Theoretically, unfiltered reality. Some might argue that the objective reality exists as noumenon. It's a Kant term. I don't like this Kant. The world as it is, independent of perception. This reality is inaccessible to us because perception is always mediated by our sensory organs, neural processing, and cognitive filters. That's what we're talking about, yeah. Residual sensory data. Certain raw sensory inputs, like the brightness of a light or the pitch of a sound, might seem unfiltered, but even these are influenced by the brain's interpretation. Yeah, of course. Some argue that certain bodily sensations, like pain, are more raw than cognitive perceptions, but dude, that's not interesting. Mathematical bias of reality, or mathematical and physical bias of reality. Some argue that only unfiltered reality is the world described by physics, particles, waves, and quantum fields. However, since these concepts are theoretical and not directly perceived, they don't enter conscious experience in any direct way. Yo, guys, what's also interesting is that quantum physics showed us that the receiving end of any perception or measuring already changes that thing that we want to measure or perceive. In other words, let's say there is a photon in wave state. Once we want to perceive the photon, to even know something about the photon, it has to collapse into particle state. So in other words, there is a world we can never perceive or measure because it simply is beyond measure. You can see it as if there is a very discrete, vulnerable world, and as soon as you look at it, it collapses. Okay? And that what is collapsed is our reality. Potential for pure awareness, meditative perspective. Some forms of meditation and philosophy, like Advaita Vedanta or Buddhist mindfulness, suggest that pure awareness, perception stripped of mental filters and conceptual thoughts, is possible. Such non-dual states are claimed to access something closer to raw reality by stopping the process of projection and selectivity. However, skeptics argue that even in meditation, some mental activity is ongoing. Summary. Conscious perception consists of raw sensory input, neural and cognitive processing, memory and conceptual knowledge, attention and emotional context. It is highly selective, often defiant, and heavily projected. If any part of perception is independent of these influences, it might be the raw sensory input itself. But since perception always involves interpretation, even this rawness is questionable. Some argue that the objective world, this Kant term noumenon, exists beyond our perception, but it is inaccessible to us perceiving agents. We are perceiving agents. Only in states of pure awareness, as described in meditation traditions, might one glimpse something closer to an unfiltered reality. But even then, it is unclear if this awareness is free from projection or simply a different kind of projection. You know, let's say you look at a tree and you stop projecting that tree. Then you don't see the tree anymore, but you see a pattern that is so overwhelming, but you can't say what it is. And when you want to say that it is a tree, you first need to project the tree from the inside into that pattern that you see, bro. All right. Qualia are the subjective first-person experiences. Yeah, sorry, I just had to make a small break. I think I will end the video here because it's already long enough, but let me finish first, right? Okay. Yeah, let me repeat. Only in states of pure awareness, as described in meditation traditions, might one glimpse something closer to an unfiltered reality. But even then, it's unclear if this awareness is free from projection or simply a different kind of projection. Sorry, I had to repeat this. And if you like this video and you want more of this stuff, we can go on to Qualia, which is the subjective first-person experience that accompany perception. That is the what it's like aspect of consciousness, okay? And we could hone in on this topic as well as one important topic from the beginning, which are the topics that we can influence through working on it. Okay, so if you like more of this content, let me know. My inspiration for talking about this is things like when you dream of something or you have visions and pictures of something, and then it comes to reality and everybody around you starts to validate it to you. This can be very strange because then you think, okay, something that had its origin almost in within me, something that I felt, becomes reality. And things like that. And also phenomenons like when we see something that we don't know, like the drones that's going on in New Jersey. Probably it's all projection or a feedback loop, because once you put awareness to the sky, maybe more people starting their own drones, and everybody's looking and nobody is really educated about how stars look like, how comets look like, how planes and satellites, you know what I'm saying? And then suddenly there is this feedback loop and everybody sees it now. But then it's projected fears, expectations, and so on. We are predicting machines, and only when we see something that contradicts our perception, we learn, so to say, that what we see is maybe something different than what we expected. So these topics, these ongoing topics of mass hysteria, projection, conspiracy, as well as when we have experiences of something that starts as a feeling, intuition, vision, dream, whatever, manifesting in reality, is a strange thing to happen. And how can that be? Where is the connection, right? So if you want more of this content, let me know. And this is the message for today. Thank you for tuning in.